and we are now happy that the arrangements that are being put in place will lead to improvements and that the performance of the contractor will improve.
Councillor Cohen. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Salinger.
Thank you. This is into Mr. Travis. My mind went back to very similar words that were used by officers in this authority when we entered into the contract within Fremantle, which became Catalyst, which ended up in court and costing the council millions of pounds settlement because the contract wasn't able to be kept, frankly, by either side. But it cost us a fortune just to sort it out. Back in my early days of my political life, when I was but observing matters in Harringay, we had similar problems with the contract over a simple little matter like cutting grass, which ended up with the grass knee-high across the borough. The contract was interpreted in different ways by the people on both sides of the contract. We're talking here about massive contracts over a very long period. If you had looked back at local government with the benefit of hindsight over the last 10 years, you would never have predicted where we are today. And my real question for you is given the problem even of interpreting hindsight, how can we have any confidence that what is in a contract today will be appropriate to either the needs of the people or the needs of the borough, or indeed be able to meet what may well be different financial constraints in 10 years' time?
Absolutely right. Thank you.
Chairman, the issue with the Catalyst contract is of course interesting and completely relevant. As a matter of fact, I was the officer who dealt with the problems that were caused by it. So I'm very, very keenly aware of the issues which arose and also why they arose. It's important, therefore, that organisations learn lessons from incidents of that sort. And the response to that is really to say that in taking forward this programme, these projects, that the lessons are learned and that we do it differently. That is about making sure that we're clear with members about what is required, that we put in place a robust, competitive procurement process to find the best provider, and that we have a rigorous contractual framework, and that we seek appropriate expert advice to make sure that those things are in place. And that is what we are doing with this programme. The point about long-term contracts, and of course that is a massively important factor. But again, I think, as I said earlier, what we're trying to achieve here is to get partners who are wanting to work with the council for the long term, to have a mutually successful relationship that benefits both parties, that genuinely work in partnership with us to deal with the change which will inevitably come through that 10-year period. But of course, that needs to be underpinned by a rigorous contract and a rigorous contractual performance framework. And there therefore is a formal process to deal with variations. And there is a formal process to measure performance and to make sure that there is a contractual mechanism to penalise poor performance, and ultimately, if certain thresholds are reached, to terminate the contract. Now that is all there, but the intention here clearly is to have a partnership that can work in the long term, but that of course means that the council will change and the partner will need to change the ways in which they deliver through that period.
Jim, can I ask just two other questions? There's talk about a joint venture as opposed to complete outsourcing. In the Cabinet Resources paper last December, the option of a joint venture was almost dismissed in a couple of lines, but then left in just in case. Has that situation changed in a way that when members are asked to decide, we will be given a choice between two joint ventures, or is it going to be one joint venture and one outsourcing, or two outsourcing?
Members will ultimately decide, of course. I mean, the way in which the procurement works is that there is a discussion about the service, and that will be underpinned by a contract in the normal way. There is also a discussion about the joint venture and how that might operate. And at the moment, the dialogue with bidders is proceeding on that basis. As I've said, ultimately, of course, it was a decision for members to determine what type of arrangement is ultimately entered into.
I'll pursue the question elsewhere about how or where that change came about. Can I just end up on a question of shared services? Because you indicated in your response to the petitions that this process had started back in 2008, there or thereabouts, at which time the council leadership was talking about shared services, and indeed you talked about a one public sector approach, which was language used back in those days as shared back office services between different parts of the public sector. As it happens, and I haven't brought it with me, I asked questions of officers in the last couple of weeks over what services we do share currently with other boroughs. There are some joint agreements around mental health and learning disabilities through the health service, which have been in place in one form or another since the early 1990s. There are one or two others like waste, which has been going for decades as well. The only shared services as such that we have are the legal service, the registrar's service, and the dog warden. And that's about it. So for all the huffing and puffing over those years, and the legal services we've only just done, and I think that remains, the jury's out on how effective that will be. Got off to a very rocky start when a legal officer allowed a committee here to run on till 11 o'clock from Harrow, even though our standing orders said it shouldn't go on beyond 10:30. But there's nothing. As far as shared back office costs with any other part of the public sector, the answer is a very round zero. Nothing has ever been developed in this borough to take advantage or even to find a way of sharing back office costs with other parts.
Is there a question?
So where is this going? That part of the agenda going?
Chairman, I'm not sure I can particularly help with that. The programme, as it has evolved, has been clear at every stage about the options that are available for delivery, and decisions have been made about the best option. Certainly, it depends what you mean by shared service. Clearly, it is the case that if you outsource a service which is commonly provided by the private sector, then effectively you will receive the economies of scale inherent in a shared service through a different route. So that is one interesting aspect, I suppose, of the discussion. However, in respect of the programme as it is today, it is what it is. It has been arrived at through an exhaustive and completely transparent process.
No,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Sharon. I do understand some of the concerns voiced by the lead petitioner and echoed to a degree by Councillor Salinger. I wonder if perhaps Mr. Travers could help us to allay those fears by confirming what is my understanding from previous meetings, and we've heard similar comments from residents and some also from councillors before. And my understanding is that these contracts actually, well, for a start, that actually commercial contracts of this size, sort of as standard, would always be for a relatively long period of time, and that 10 years is not particularly long for that sort of contract. And then also, perhaps more importantly, this sort of contract is always drafted with provisions and mechanisms included that allow for variance and allow us to monitor the way that services are provided. So it's not as if we're sort of locked into a single service level for a whole 10 years, but actually, you know, there is some scope in that, and that's actually fairly standard. Could you just confirm that's the case, and B, possibly expand on it?
Well, I do confirm that is the case, and that for these services and for the challenge of the council's requirements as contemplated, that it would be completely normal to seek an arrangement for this length of time. And in doing so, of course, things will change through that period, possibly in ways we can't even think of sitting here now. And therefore, the contracts do have the mechanisms to allow for that change. And I would emphasise that, yes, of course, it is all underpinned by a contractual framework, but genuinely, there needs to be an element of partnership recognising these arrangements, whereby they can evolve for the benefit of both parties. And of course, with a commercial arrangement with a third party, of course, that is about the return that will be made, the reasonable return that will be made. But having said that, and we all recognise that, it will be a success for both the council and the provider if it is able to respond to those challenges through that 10-year period.